The Zephyrian Preservation Ark drifted through the Andromeda sector like a tomb among the stars. Once, it had been humanity's pride, a bioengineered sanctuary ship carrying the last specimens of Earth's extinct megafauna, reconstructed through quantum DNA mapping and neural engram restoration. Now, in the year 2847, it was little more than a forgotten relic, its corridors silent except for the hum of failing life support systems. Elsa adjusted her rebreather mask as she descended into sublevel 7, where the temperature dropped 15 degrees and the air tasted of ozone and decay. At 19, she was the youngest xenobiological technician ever assigned to the Ark, though assigned was generous. The Interstellar Conservation Collective had posted the position as a punishment detail. No one volunteered to tend dying dreams. The dragon occupied Chamber 17. Verk was not a dragon in the mythological sense, though early human colonists had named his species thus when they'd first encountered the Dracony on Kepler 442b. He was a bioengineered hybrid, part earthen Komodo genetics, part alien Dracony physiology, and part something else entirely. Scientists had created his kind during the Unification Wars as living weapons, creatures capable of surviving in multiple atmospheric conditions, their scales embedded with photovoltaic cells that could generate electromagnetic pulses. When the wars ended, the dragons became obsolete. Verk was the last. Elsa found him where she always did, coiled in the center of his habitat, a space designed to simulate both Earth's Cretaceous period and Kepler 442b's crimson skies. His scales, once iridescent copper and gold, had faded to ash gray. The neural monitoring system projected holographic readouts above his massive form, oxygen saturation at 42%, cellular regeneration at 9%, estimated time remaining 3 months, 2 weeks, 4 days. "Hello, Verk," Elsa said softly, settling onto the observation platform that jutted into his enclosure. The dragon's eye, singular now since the left had clouded over last month, cracked open. It was violet, shot through with circuits of bioluminescent gold. Consciousness flickered there, ancient and weary. "Little star," he rumbled, his voice a subsonic vibration that Elsa felt in her chest cavity. The translator chip in her ear rendered his language into standard Terran. "You return." "I promised I would." She unzipped her supply pack and withdrew a battered data tablet. "I brought the next chapter." For 6 months since her arrival on the Ark, Elsa had been reading to Verk. It had started accidentally. She'd been reviewing old Earth literature archives to pass time during her shifts, reading aloud to herself for company. Verk had awakened from his sedation cycle and asked her to continue. Since then, it had become ritual. Tonight's selection was Moby Dick. "The human who hunts the white whale," Verk said, a sound like distant thunder suggesting amusement. "An appropriate metaphor for your species, always pursuing that which destroys you." "Or maybe it's about obsession," Elsa countered, settling into her reading position. "About how we define ourselves by what we can't have." "Then we are not so different, your kind and mine." Elsa began to read, her voice steady in the cavernous chamber. She read of storms and whaling ships, of Ahab's madness and the sea's indifference. Verk listened, his breathing synchronized to the rhythm of her words, the biomonitors showing a slight uptick in his neural activity, the only time the readings ever improved. An hour passed, then 2. When Elsa's throat grew hoarse, she paused to sip from her water tube. Verk's eye had closed, but she knew he wasn't sleeping. The dragons never truly slept anymore. Their neural patterns showed a constant state of semi-consciousness, trapped between life and whatever came after. "Why do you stay?" Verk asked suddenly. "The others abandoned this place cycles ago. The head curator departed last month. You could request transfer." Elsa set down the tablet. She'd asked herself the same question countless times during sleepless nights in her quarters, listening to the Ark systems groan and fail. The truth was complicated. Because you shouldn't die alone, she said finally. No one should. I am a weapon, a mistake. Your governments created my kind to kill, and when we became inconvenient, they imprisoned us in museums. You're also a person, Elsa said firmly. Consciousness confers personhood. That's in the Sentience Accords of 2703. Verk's tail shifted, scales scraping against the habitat floor. Laws written by those who have never been unmade. Elsa stood and approached the barrier, a shimmering force field that could be deactivated from her wrist console. She'd never done it before. The protocols strictly forbade direct contact with Class A bioweapons. She deactivated it. The air changed immediately, becoming thicker, charged with the ozone smell of Verk's electromagnetic field. Elsa stepped through, her boots touching the actual ground of his habitat for the first time. Little star, Verk rumbled, a note of alarm in his voice. The protocols are written by people who left you here to die, Elsa interrupted. She crossed the distance between them, her hand outstretched. This close Verk was enormous. His head alone was the size of a small shuttle. Each scale was a work of art. Even in decay, layered photovoltaic cells that had once powered flight, now dull and cracked. She touched his snout, feeling the coolness of his skin, the faint vibration of his energy field against her palm. Verk shuddered. I could kill you. My nervous system is degrading. I might discharge involuntarily. You won't, Elsa said. She didn't know how she knew, but she did. For a long moment, they stayed like that. Human girl and dying dragon, separated by 100 million years of evolution and united by loneliness. Read to me, Verk whispered, please. Elsa returned to the platform but left the barrier down. She read until her voice was barely a whisper, until the ship's night cycle dimmed the lights to near darkness, until the words of Melville blended with her own thoughts about mortality and meaning. The weeks that followed established a new pattern. Elsa abandoned her quarters and moved her sleeping pod into Chamber 17. She ate her meals beside Verk, read to him for hours, and spoke to him about everything. Her childhood on Europa's ice colonies, her dreams of becoming a conservation biologist, her fear that humanity had lost something essential in its rush toward the stars. Verk, in turn, told her stories of Kepler 442b before the terraforming, of the Dracony civilization that had welcomed humanity before the unification wars turned neighbors into enemies. He spoke of philosophy and poetry in languages that predated human civilization, which her translator rendered into approximations that still made her cry. We had a concept, he said one night, his voice weaker than before. Roughly translated, it means the beauty of impermanent things. Your cherry blossoms contain something of it. Mono no aware, Elsa supplied. Japanese, we understood it too. Perhaps that is why I do not fear the ending, Verk said. I am becoming mono no aware. The medical alerts began with increasing frequency. Verk's cellular regeneration dropped to 3%, then 2%. The Orcs AI sent automated messages to the collective requesting euthanasia authorization. Elsa deleted them all. On what the systems predicted would be Verk's final night, Elsa climbed onto his foreleg, a liberty he permitted, and sat against his chest, feeling the labored expansion and contraction of his lungs, each breath a struggle against entropy. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry we did this to you. I'm sorry we made you and then forgot why. Little star, Verk rumbled, you carry sorrow that is not yours to bear. Someone has to remember, Elsa said fiercely. Someone has to witness. Then witness this, Verk said. I forgive them. I forgive your species for its fear and its cruelty. And I thank you, Elsa of the Ice Colonies, reader of old books, for showing me that humanity contains more than its worst impulses. His breathing slowed. The biomonitors screamed warnings. Elsa held his claw, her other hand on the tablet. One more chapter, she asked, voice breaking. Please. She read the final pages of Moby Dick, of the Pequod's destruction and Ishmael's survival, of the indifferent sea that swallows everything. Her voice never wavered, though tears tracked down her face. When she finished, Verk's eye opened one last time. "Beautiful," he breathed, "all of it, even the pain." The light faded from his violet eye. The electromagnetic field that had surrounded him for 3 centuries dissipated like morning mist. The biomonitors flatlined, their alarms echoing through the empty ark. Elsa sat with him until the ship's morning cycle, until the emergency lights activated, until her body forced her to acknowledge that she was alone. But she wasn't, not really. In the following weeks, as the collective finally sent a crew to decommission the Ark, Elsa filed a formal report, not a technical document but a narrative. She wrote of Verk's intelligence and artistry, his capacity for forgiveness, his thoughts on impermanence and beauty. She attached recordings of their conversations, of him discussing philosophy and art. The report went viral across human space. Within months, the sentience accords were amended. The remaining bioengineered species were granted full citizenship rights. Museums became sanctuaries. And in Chamber 17 of the Zephyrian Preservation Ark, now a memorial, visitors could activate a hologram of a young woman reading to a dragon, her voice steady and sure, bearing witness to the last of his kind. Elsa herself returned to active conservation work, but she carried Verk's final gift, a neural engram fragment, a memory crystal containing his consciousness patterns. It wasn't life, not exactly, but on quiet nights, she could activate it and hear his voice rumbling in the subsonic frequencies that made her chest vibrate. "Little star," the memory would say, "thank you for the stories." And Elsa would reply, as she always did, "Thank you for listening." In the end, that was the most human thing. Not the technology or the starships or the wars, but the simple act of sitting with the dying and reading them stories, of bearing witness, of refusing to let anyone face the darkness alone. The galaxy was vast and cold and indifferent, but in one small chamber, for one brief moment in the cosmic timeline, a human girl and a dragon had proven that kindness could transcend engineering, that connection could bloom in the ruins of empires, and that even the smallest acts of compassion could reshape civilizations. Verk was gone, but he had not died alone, and that, Elsa knew, made all the difference.